Amen. All right, Judges chapter 7. We had looked at the first several verses there, talking about them whittling down the army, the number of men that were with him. And let's just quickly review verses 1 through 7, if I could get someone to read that for us. Judges 7, 1 through 7. Carter, go ahead.
Then Zerubbabel and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the well of Herod, so that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, "The people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel claim glory for itself against me, saying, My own hand has saved me. Now, therefore, proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, Whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of people returned, and 10,000 remained. But the Lord said to Gideon, The people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Then it will be that of whom I say to you, This one shall go with you, the same shall go with you. And of whomever I say to you, This one shall not go with you, the same shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, Everyone who laps from the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set apart by himself. Likewise, everyone who gets down on his knees to drink, and the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people got down on their knees to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, By 300 men who lapped, I will save you, and deliver the Midianites into your hand. Let all the other people go, every man to his place.
All right. So here you see this great whittling down of the numbers. He was able to recruit a fairly sizable force, 32,000, nothing to sneeze at. We noted before that when you get to chapter 8, I think it's the verse is skipping me here, but the enemies, verse 10, chapter 8, verse 10, they had 15,000 of the enemy who were left after the battle, and then 120,000, it says, that had fallen. So 32,000 against 135,000, that's still greatly imbalanced in this type of warfare. But then that's taken on down to 10,000, and then it's taken down to 300. And as we mentioned, this is to show clearly that the Lord is the one who's behind what's about to happen. It's not by the power and the might of man. It's not by their strategies, their skills, or anything like that. It's the Lord that is bringing about this great victory. And one of the things I wanted us to dwell on for a few minutes is the fact that numbers are irrelevant. When it comes to doing God's will, carrying out God's will, the number of people doesn't really matter. If the Lord is on the side of His people, and He is, then there's going to be a victory. So think about this. If you go to 1 John chapter 4, 1 John chapter 4, and let's notice verse 4 there. 1 John 4, verse 4. Who will read that for us? Charles?
You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is with you is greater than he who is in the world.
All right. And then also let's get chapter 5, 1 John 5, verses 4 and 5. You want to get that, Charles? Go ahead.
Whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is he who overcomes the world, but he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God?
Okay, a few verses there talking about overcoming, having the victory, and how that he who is in us, the Lord, is greater than he who is in the world. Of course, who's in the world? Yeah, Satan's in the world. When we view the world, does it seem like that is a true statement? Who do most people follow? Satan. When you talk about people who are religious, who do most people follow? Satan. Even though they believe, they would claim they're following Christ, they're actually deceived, just like the New Testament talks about, whether that's, people of the circumcision, trying to press things, or as John deals with really in his letters with the Gnostics, things like that, that you've got people who are religiously minded, who are zealous in their religious beliefs and very excited and very active. And there are times when we can look out at that and grow discouraged, thinking about everybody's headed that way. The people of the world are so immoral, so ungodly. And then these religious people, they're wrong. And it's just terrible. It's awful. And so we can get down about that. Mike, did you have...
I was going to say that, we often see the church as just barely hanging on. Look, Matthew chapter 16, verse 18 says that the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church. So it's not that we're barely hanging on. It's that we are overcoming through Christ, through, His word. And we have to keep that in mind. That, numbers to, I think what you're pointing out to, numbers isn't how God measures victories.
Right. And when we back up to Acts chapter 1, how many disciples are in Acts 1 when it says they're talking about those who are in Jerusalem at least? Yeah, about 120. How many apostles are there, at least by the end of the chapter? Well, by the end of the chapter, they've got 12 again because they go through. But at the beginning, they've got 11 because Judas is gone. They go through the process of Matthias coming on board. But so you got 12. You just think about that. And those 12 are counted among that 120. By the end of Acts chapter 2, how many are there? Yeah. Okay, 3,120. And then you get to Acts chapter 4, and what does it tell us? Yeah, their numbers had increased to 5,000. And then you keep going through, and it talks about multitudes being added to the Lord and many being added to Him as the gospel continues to spread. You think about that small number, and then how, of course, by today, but even when you look in New Testament times, how that gospel went out and it was conquering the world and how many people were being influenced and brought into the kingdom of God. And so let's ask ourselves this question: can a congregation of less than 90 people, can we have an impact?
Yes.
Can we do good in this world? We absolutely can. When you think about what happens with Gideon and his 300 and the victory they have, what happened in the first century, the same God still rules today. And He still wants the world to be conquered with the gospel. And we can do much good. Mike?
You also look at the immorality that was going on in all of these examples that you're talking about with Gideon, and even in the first century church. The church thrives inside of that. We have to understand that. As we get concerned about the morality that we see kind of crumbling around us, that's where the church does its best work.
Okay, exactly right. Because the darker the world, the brighter the light of the gospel as it stands out in contrast to that. So, exactly right. So, I understand and I feel discouragement at times because you try to talk to people, you try to teach people. Maybe it is they seem receptive and there's an open door for a while, but then it comes down to the point of here's the truth, and there are a lot of people who just don't want it. They just, it comes right down to it. They look at it, they see it, they understand it. Yeah, I don't want to go that way. And it's a very simple things. It's not like you've even gotten to, well, here's all the things you need to give up and change, but here's what it takes to become a Christian. I mean, just you get to the point of baptism with some people and they're like, I'm out. And it doesn't, and it gets to our minds about why would somebody do that? I don't understand that. All these people just don't go with the world. What good can we do? I mean, there's churches around here we could go and look at. They've got 300, 500, 1,000 people. And we think, well, we're just this tiny little group. That's okay. That's all right. Mike?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, there's always kind of this culling or this filtering out process that God has. And baptism is one that's very simple, but extremely hard for people to do.
Yeah. It's like Christ being a stumbling block to some. His commands are a stumbling block to some. But let's not be discouraged about that, because there are people who want to do what's right. There are people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We have a room full of people who are expressing by their presence here, hey, I'm interested, I want to know, I want to learn, I want to serve. And so there are others out there like that, and we need to appreciate that, and that God can use us to reach them. Well, let's go to Judges 7 and read verses 8 down through 15, please. Who will get 8 through 15 for us, Zach?
So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Gideon was below him in the valley. That same night the Lord said to him, Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant. And you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. Then he went down with Purah his servant to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in abundance, and their camels were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade, and he said, Behold, I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, This is no other than the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. As soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand.
Okay. So question number 4 was, how is God helping Gideon in this section? How does Gideon react to it? What's happening here? Let me ask this. Does Gideon need some more encouragement and to gain some more confidence? Yeah. So the Lord is working on that. So how does he bring that about? Yeah, this man had a dream. Who is this man? Yeah, he's among the enemy that has a dream about what's going to unfold. And so we might scratch our heads, how did this all come about? But as Gideon happens to go down to the camp, he goes by this guy who's telling this dream, and then this other guy gives the interpretation of the dream. This isn't necessarily where there's inspiration taking place, but this guy happens to have a dream. This guy happens to give that interpretation. And Gideon overhears that, and he's excited about it. It gives him encouragement about that. You know, he says there, verse 15, Arise, for the Lord has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand. He comes back fully confident as the leader of this small band of men, the original 300, if you will. And they then have this great courage to go out and do what they're about to do that we'll read about in just a moment. But God reassures us. How does God reassure us? He's reassuring Gideon here. How does he reassure us? Through His Word, I would put that, yes, primary at the top. What's one of the promises He makes to us? Hebrews 13. What's that?
You'll never lose.
Yes, exactly. Very good, Frank. Hebrews 13, verses 5 and 6. And do you want to read that for us, Frank? Hebrews 13, 5 and 6.
Let your conduct be without covetousness, be content with such things as you have. For He Himself says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me?
Okay, so in what situation does that apply? Carrie? All right. Every situation. I will never leave you. So whatever it is, are there times when we do feel alone, outnumbered, intimidated? Yeah, there are times like that. But the Lord says, I'll never leave you. I'll be there with you. I'm there for you. And so, as Anita said, through His Word, He gives us encouragement and reassurance. Is there any other way?
Very often it comes in the form of brethren.
Very good. You're tracking exactly with me. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 7. 2 Corinthians chapter 7. And let's read verses 5 through 7. Now think about this. Think about who's writing this. 2 Corinthians 7, verses 5 through 7. Who will get that for us? Elijah?
For indeed, when we came to Macedonia, our bodies had no rest, but we were troubled on every side. Outside were conflicts, inside were fears. Nevertheless, God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus, and not only by his coming, but also by the consolation with which he was comforted when he told us of your earnest desire, your mourning, your zeal for me, so that I rejoice even more.
All right. So, who's writing this? Paul. How do we view Paul?
As strong.
Strong. You've got Paul, and I don't know, maybe you see Paul, Peter, John, maybe Paul, John, Peter, maybe it's John, Paul, Peter. However, those three, at least in my mind in the New Testament, they are the pillars among God's people, just like granite. But what do we learn about Paul here?
He had fear.
He had fear. There were times when he was fearful of whatever circumstance, whatever situation was going on. There's conflicts outside, fears in. Verse 6, what does he indicate about his spirit, about his mindset?
Well, I think that what he shows is that he can be comforted, and he places that on God, the comforting, through someone else.
Yes, and he says here that God comforts the downcast. Paul was downcast at times. See, when I think of Paul, that's not where my mind goes. And so let's appreciate the fact that, there are times we could be like Paul, we could be like Gideon, we could be uncertain, unsure, we could be downcast, we could have these fears welling up within us. But then God gives us assurance. He gives us assurance by His Word. He gives us assurance through our brethren, through the coming of Titus. And Titus coming along and saying, hey, here's how things are going at Corinth, and here's what has happened, and hearing reports of other brethren. And so we can get that encouragement through our brethren, through their presence, through their actions. And so God is looking out for us in that way. Any other ways you can think of God helps us?
I think the congregation there bringing that good news, that Titus could bring that good news. You know, so it's not just about Titus being there, it's the news that he brought about other brethren and, you know, where that work was. And so, you know, we as a congregation need to, you know, keep that in mind, that, you know, we, you know, can bring good tidings to others.
Right. And I will say that among this group, knowing of some things that various brethren have done, that's a huge encouragement. Okay, you know, this situation is not so good, or, you know, struggles of life and wondering about the advancement of truth, and then, boom, you learn about something they've done, and it's very encouraging to us. Other ways? Prayer comforts us through our prayer, reassures us through prayer that as we go to Him. And what do we do with those fears, Tom, in prayer?
Lay on God.
Put it on God, right? That helps us. That's a mechanism for us, an exercise, if you will, for us to go through to place that on God. That gives us that peace that passes understanding, that reassurance. Exactly. Yes. Where? Oh, so, all right, very good, very good. So, great minds thinking alike there. It can be that observation of others. It can be even through our experiences, knowing that God has carried us through, and going through things in life helps to reassure us.
Seeing God's providence, typically, if not all the time, after the fact, there's no way that would have worked out A plus B plus C plus however many variables to lead to this point. That had to have been God. And maybe I should have known that all along. I know there's seeing time, chance, and the randomness we can't always figure out. But as you start to piece things together, then that's reassuring. God was with me the whole time.
Okay, if y'all indulge me for just a minute. All of us, through God's providence, are here today. Trace that back out over the past 5, 10, 20 years. Personally, I can look at that and I can see God's providence has led me here. That's such an encouragement to me. Whereas I had ideas, I had plans, ups and downs of life. And I'm here today being encouraged by all of you. And I mean, not just Sunday, October 20th. I'm talking about I'm here at Newton with you. Great encouragement to me. So you think about that, to Zach's point, you can look back and see some of those things. You can't look forward, but you can look back and say, wow, look at what has happened. Any other thoughts there? All right, so pressing on here, this battle is going to take place as Gideon gets this reassurance going down there. Let's read verses 16 through 25. Judges 7, 16 to 25. Who's got that? Ron?
Then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, with empty pitchers and torches inside the pitchers. And he said to them, look at me and do likewise. Watch, and when I come to the edge of the camp, you shall do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you also blow the trumpets on every side of the whole camp, and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outpost of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just as they had posted the watch. And they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that they held, the torches in their left hand, and the trumpets their right hands were blowing. And they cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And every man stood in his place all around the camp. And the whole army ran and cried out and fled. When the the 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the whole camp. And the army fled to Beth-Achaia toward Zerah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah and Teba. And the men of Israel gathered together from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh, and pursued the Midianites. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout all the mountains of Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites, and seize from them the watering places as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered together and seized the watering places as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. And they captured 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb they killed at the winepress of Zeeb. They pursued Midian and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon on the other side of the Jordan.
All right. So here's this attack. What kind of military strategy is this? Okay. There's kind of the divide and conquer going on.
I would say shock and awe.
Okay, so this is at night. It says, they post up on the middle watch. So in the darkness of the night, they get the 300 in their 100 groups, and they're on different sides out there. What kind of sense does it make?
Well, militarily, it doesn't make any sense because they're unarmed. As he describes, one hand's holding a pitcher, the other hand is holding the trumpet, and they're going to engage in battle with those 2 things. So, strategically, as a person of war, that makes no sense.
Right. This is not typically how a battle is fought, right? Any other thoughts, Tom?
It's kind of just like deception, because making the noise, it's like you're at night you're looking up and you see the flames. There could be thousands of soldiers out there.
That's what it is. It's an illusion of they're surrounded, and there's this great army that's around them, and it creates that panic.
And as we have studied previously, war was undertaken during the daylight, even the extension of the day, right?
Right.
Permitted so that they could continue with the battle. And this, again, is completely contrary to all that had been previously practiced.
Okay, what does this remind you of? It's not the exact, but it's what? Yeah, Jericho. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you march around and be quiet and then you just shout? And so this is clearly the Lord at work, and the text makes the point of the Lord turned every man's sword against himself. So all those people down there in Midian, all of a sudden, there's the panic that sets in, and they just start killing each other in the confusion. So God took care of it without the Israelites having to do the heavy lifting. So they get in there. There's the shock and awe, as Ron mentioned, and Israel presses the victory. It talks about 23 to 25 how, there's the men from Naphtali, Asher, Manasseh, and then he calls out to people in the mountains of Ephraim, come on, we're on the attack, the enemy's on the run, let's join in, let's get this all done. Mike.
And the fear that Gideon had about only having 300 men was now transferred to the enemy, because they don't know how many men are up there, they just know they're outnumbered. So that fear had been transferred to them.
Yes. And so let's understand that we don't need to fear, though we may be few and there may be many on the other side. We don't need to have the fear. When we're with God and we're standing in truth, it truly does strike fear in others. And that's part of what you get when you engage others with the truth. You speak the truth clearly to them. They can get very fearful, and that's sometimes part of why they pull back and they don't want to go any further in the study. They don't want to do what the Word of God is telling them to do, because all those fears start coming up. That's Satan dealing with them in that case. But back to Judges chapter 7 here, they have this battle, and the enemy's killing each other. They press it. They get Oreb and they get Zeeb here, and they're killed, and their heads are brought to Gideon on the other side of Jordan. So there is essentially this great and complete victory, and they're going to keep on pressing down in chapter 8 here that we'll read in just a moment. But this is a great victory brought about through God in spite of their small numbers. Anything else before we jump into 8?
Stephen, as you had made a previous comment, I was thinking about Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who could be against us?
Right.
Who could withstand the power of God?
Exactly. They can't do it. And to your point, even in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, where he talks about the wisdom of this world compared to the foolishness of God, well, the foolishness, so-called, of God is greater than the wisdom of the world. We need to have confidence in that, not be intimidated by the people of this world. All right, very good. Let's go to Judges 8, and let's read verses 1 through 3 here. 1 through 3. Who's got that? Carter?
Now the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that.
All right. Question number 5 was, what is indicated about tribal relations in this section here?
They're always strained. It's just, why do you do this? Why do you do that? We see that throughout their whole history. From the brothers, after the brothers, and the nations.
How was it at the end of Joshua? What? Okay, they had the incident where the 2.5 tribes are going back to the East Jordan. They build the altar, and there's the tensions there. But when that is all settled, how are they as a nation? They're together. Like the ones on the west of the Jordan, the 9.5 tribes, they were unified. We're not going to tolerate any departure, and we're going to go confront these guys. And they confront them, and it's worked out. It's explained, and everything's good. But now that they've begun to depart from the law, and this, of course, has been going on some time, they begin to turn against each other because they're not united together in truth. They're not standing together. And so there's these frictions, and it goes back to, it reflects how the brothers had frictions among them at times. And here's this friction between Ephraim and the rest of them, and they're jealous. They're upset about what has happened here. How does Gideon deal with that at this point?
Well, he makes a comparison, and if I understand this right, Steve, what he's saying is, what is greater, the crushing of the grapes or the vintage that you receive from it, the product that you receive from it? So he's saying, we engaged in the battle, but you killed the 2 princes that escaped. So you had a significant part of this because you got the 2 leaders that had been flee.
Yes. Yeah, he's saying what you've done is better than what we did, because you had like the crown jewel of it here. You took care of that. And so he's praising, he's being extremely diplomatic. He's very smart in what he's doing. He doesn't strike back at them. As the proverb writer says, a soft answer turns away wrath, and that's what he's doing here. It's Gideon, he's showing great character at this point. He's saying, it's not about me. It's not about my glory. I want everything to be okay here. And so he gives them great and high praise and that allays their anger and everything, and it's fine then. Any other thoughts there? Great lesson for us, by the way. Praising others for the things they do.
I think
Yes, sir.
also, as you describe that, it shows his leadership abilities, to keep unity within, the efforts that he is seeking to accomplish.
Right. They need to keep pressing this, and they need some stability among their people. So exactly right. Great leadership that's there. All right, let's read Judges 8, verses 4 through 9. Who's got that? Elijah.
When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of Succoth, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian." And the leaders of Succoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" So Gideon said, "For this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." And he went up from there to Penuel and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So we also spoke to the men of Penuel, saying, "When I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower."
Okay. So they pursue the Midianites, and it says that they are exhausted, but they still pursue them. Anything we can learn there?
Just a thought from what you were talking about previously, people of Ephraim, they were complaining because they were not participating and engaging. And now we have these two, they're complaining because they're being asked to participate and engage. So as you and Mike were talking about previously, there's always conflict, no matter what side you take.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's still having troubles with his brethren in carrying out this campaign here. And these Gideon and the 300 that are with him, they're exhausted. Remember, this has been something, no doubt they hadn't slept since the previous day. They had been up, they went out there in the middle watch, and they've been on the chase now, the pursuit of these people for some distance. And it says they cross over the Jordan, and they're continuing that pursuit. So sometimes it is when we're on the pursuit, when things are going well, we just got to keep going. Ron.
Obviously, they don't believe in his success from what he's telling them that he's going to accomplish.
Exactly.
They're denying it.
Okay. There are times when brethren will not support us in what we're doing. And we ask, hey, help out. And it's not going to be there. It's part of it. Now, don't threaten with thorns from briars. Don't do that. But it's just a part of it. So, but they keep going. Okay, you're not with us? Well, we're still going to keep going. We're still going to keep pressing this. Now, one of the interesting things about these two places here, Succoth is the place where Jacob camped returning to Canaan in Genesis chapter 32. Penuel, or Peniel, it's known by both names, is a place where Jacob wrestled with God and his name was changed to Israel. So these are places that have a historic significance in the biblical account, and their forefathers, the great fathers of Jacob in particular, the father of Israel, or who they're named after. And these men are not willing to help out, not willing to refresh his people even. So it goes on to tell us that these kings are captured. Let's read verses 10. Let's go all the way through 21. Who's got that? 10 to 21. Judges 8. Go ahead, Joshua.
Zebulun and Zalmunna were in Carpor with a force of about 15,000 men. All that were left of the enemies of the eastern people, 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. Gideon went up by the river Nomad, east Nobah, and brought Suha, and attacked the unsuspecting army. Zebulun and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, and he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. Gideon, son of Joash, then returned from the battle and passed over Jordan. He caught a young man of Succoth and questioned him. The young man wrote down for him the names of the sons of the 7 judges of Succoth and their elders in the town. When Gideon came to Session of Succoth, Zebulun and Zalmunna, about whom he taunted me by saying,
taught them in the lesson of punishing them with thorns and briars. He also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. Then he asked the others on them, what kind of men do you say like people? Men like you, they answered, we come to the bearing of the grain. Gideon replied, go to my brothers, the sons of my own mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you have spared your lives, I would not kill you. Turning to Zechariah, his oldest son, he said, kill him. But Zechariah did not draw his sword, because he was only a boy and was afraid. So then Hillman said, come do it yourself. As is in there, so is his strength. So Gideon stepped forward and killed him, took the ornaments out of Haman's neck.
Okay. So you look at this, and they captured and killed these kings, which he was confident he was going to do when he went to Succoth, when he went to Penuel. And so when he does that and he goes back to them, what does he do to the men of Succoth there? What's one of the things it says that he does? In our translations, maybe it's really a euphemism that he uses here in verse 16. Josh, what was your translation? What did it say about that?
It said that he taught them a lesson.
He taught them a lesson. What does anybody else have there? Do you have a footnote, anything? Discipline. Okay. How is he disciplining them? How is he teaching a lesson?
Well, he's doing what he told them that he was going to do. He fulfilled it wasn't a threat, it was, I guess, an ultimatum that he gave them. And so he does do that, as the verse says, with the thorns and the briars that he said he was going to beat them with.
Okay. Mike.
I kind of picture Jesus kind of tying the knots and the whips and things like that. You know, he's disciplining people, he's teaching them a lesson, and that's kind of the same idea that I get with these briars.
Right, yeah. He's now it says he's teaching these men a lesson, but who is he really teaching a lesson to? Yeah. All of Israel. You need to support our fight against our enemies. Ron?
And as it previously noted, he got the names of all the leaders and the elders, and those are the ones that he chose out because they were the ones that made the decision about this. So they directly received the consequence of their decision.
Exactly right. I also think of Nehemiah in dealing with people in his day and jerking out their hair. Like, we're not doing this. So this is a disciplinary action. Of course, he gets to Penuel. It talks about how he kills the men of the town. He tears that tower down. He's going on a punitive mission here against those who were not in on it with him. Now then, verses 22 to 28. Let's read that out here. 22 to 28. Who's got that? Mike.
Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son's son as well, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Yet Gideon said to them, I will request of you that each of you give an earring from his plunder, for they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, we will certainly give them to you. So they spread out the garment, and every one of them tossed an earring in from his plunder. The weight of the gold earrings that was requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, apart from the crescent amulets, the ear pendants, and the purple robes, which were on the kings of Gideon, and apart from the neck chains that were on the camels' necks. Gideon made it into an ephod and placed it in his city, Orpah. But all Israel committed infidelity with it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his household.
And one more, I think.
So Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel, and they did not lift up their heads anymore, and the land was undisturbed for 40 years in the days of Gideon.
All right. So what's this sin that plagues Gideon in his later life?
came to, to receive and fulfill God's word during a time of adversity, he did well. It was the after the fact, right after the success came, that maybe that got the best out of him and the nation of Israel.
Right, right. It's a case of where he's let his guard down here to some degree.
Well, I think obviously this is his trophy, and it's glorying in him and not God.
Okay. What's ironic about what's going on here?
He's like, I'm not taking the glory as the leader, God's the leader, but I'm going to have these little personal idols who remind me of all the things that I did, but that wasn't me. It's like this false humility.
Okay, you see in him, they offer him kingship. They offer him a dynasty in Israel. And he says, no. Okay, that's good. But then he does. So there's a contradiction in his character here. We have those, right? Sometimes we don't see them ourselves. Other people can see it, but we don't see it because we're just too close to it, I suppose. But we're blinded to our own fault. And here's a fault of Gideon, like, wait a second. You made this ephod and you are now worshiping this thing. It's become an idol. Mike?
I think we try to justify our own actions a lot of times. That's what he was trying to do. This stuff was, God gave us the plunder. I'm making an ephod out of it. But he was that way.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. All right, Lord willing, let's pick up there. We'll press on into that next lesson, getting to one of his sons here. But we'll pick up in Judges 8 and verse 29.